Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into something that literally impacts every single conversation you have, the cognitive spectrum. Today, we're decoding how human minds actually process the world. We'll look at the subtle and sometimes not so subtle signs of limited cognitive capacity, the psychological markers of a lower IQ, and then we'll flip the script to explore the hyper-connected minds of the highly gifted. Plus, we'll see how these different minds protect their mental bandwidth in our crazy, noisy modern world. It's a fascinating psychological journey, so let's jump right in and see where you might fall on this spectrum. Have you ever met someone who argues with absolute confidence, but makes, well, zero sense? They're loud, they're incredibly certain, and yet they're completely wrong. It's a hugely common and, frankly, super frustrating scenario, but here's the really fascinating part. Psychology tells us this isn't just arrogance. It's actually deeply rooted in the science of cognitive capacity. It's a subtle, real-time indicator of how their brain fundamentally processes information. Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand that misplaced confidence, we have to look at something called the Dunning Kruger Effect. Basically, it happens when people with lower cognitive ability significantly overestimate their skills. Why? Because quite literally, they don't have the intellectual capacity to realize just how much they don't know. Lower intelligence essentially prevents a person from recognizing their own blind spots. So they'll speak with this unshakable confidence. But the second you dig just a little bit deeper, there is absolutely zero logic holding the argument together. When you put these minds up against the unknown, you'll immediately spot a stark contrast. A mind with limited cognitive capacity just doesn't ask questions. They actively avoid new ideas, they get bored super easily, and they stick rigidly to what's comfortable. And that's because learning actually feels like a threat to their ego. Now contrast that with a highly capable mind. Curiosity is for sure their primary marker of intelligence. Highly intelligent people are constantly asking why. They have this burning desire to deeply understand how things work. So an extreme lack of curiosity, it's not just a quirky personality trait. It's actually a major psychological sign of cognitive limitation. And that lack of curiosity often stems from what psychologists call cognitive rigidity. This is classic black and white thinking. Individuals with lower IQs often see the world in absolute extremes. To them, something is either 100% right or 100% wrong. There is zero gray area. Handling complexity, embracing nuance, or trying to hold multiple different perspectives in your mind all at once, that requires serious cognitive effort. And quite simply, some minds just cannot manage that heavy lifting. So they default to rigidity. Now, this inability to reason logically doesn't just stay in their heads. It bleeds directly into daily behavior and emotional control. Studies actually show that low IQ often goes hand in hand with low emotional intelligence. Think about it. A simple disagreement can instantly turn into a shouting match. Because they struggle to process complex arguments, they just react impulsively. They can't regulate their anger or their frustration. And they constantly, confuse a logical disagreement with a personal attack. When you challenge their views, they take it personally instead of logically, simply because engaging in a reasoned debate takes a level of cognitive effort they just can't sustain. So, to protect their ego from all of this, they end up developing a psychological shield known as an external locus of control. This is the deeply ingrained belief that life just happens to you. Instead of taking responsibility or, actively searching for solutions, people with limited cognitive capacity will constantly blame luck. They'll blame society or they'll blame everyone else around them for their problems. It acts as a defense mechanism that prevents them from ever having to look inward and realize their own flaws. But hey, what happens when we flip the script? What does the completely opposite end of this cognitive spectrum actually look like? Well, it applies to a very, very small fraction of the population, just 2%. Only 2% of people operate with highly gifted, hyper-connected minds that process reality on an entirely different level. So the crucial point here is how this gifted processing actually works. Standard processing relies on surface-level observations. It's very linear, very step-by-step. But gifted processing, it's multidimensional. Gifted brains aren't just faster processors. They literally wire connections completely differently. They notice the subtle things that everyone else misses. They see the underlying meaning behind events, and a single thought will instantly branch out and lead to 10 others. It's like their minds are incredibly expansive webs of information. However, having this incredible mental engine is totally a double-edged sword. Gifted minds don't just think deeply, they feel intensely. They process happiness, sadness, and anger so much stronger than most people do. And because their minds literally never stop running, they're always analyzing, planning, imagining, they are highly prone to burnout and exhaustion. They also battle intense perfectionism, setting absolutely impossible standards for themselves. And this, unfortunately, often leaves them feeling isolated or fundamentally misunderstood by the rest of the world. Actually, there's research that captures their essence perfectly. It notes that they can't stand shallow explanations. They need to know why something is the way it is. Because their brains fundamentally crave depth, they refuse to just accept things at face value. Now, to someone who's a standard processor, this constant questioning can make them seem, I don't know, rebellious or just overly complicated. But it's not rebellion at all. It's actually their hardwired, biological mechanism for learning and growing, which brings up a really vital question for our modern age. How do highly aware minds protect their cognitive bandwidth from constant noise? In a digital world that is relentlessly demanding our attention 24/7, how do these deep, multidimensional thinkers survive without just burning out completely? Well, the answer starts with recognizing a psychological process called hedonic adaptation. Basically, this is when your brain gets so used to a pleasure that it just stops feeling rewarding. Think about getting likes and followers on social media. For a highly self-aware person, this external validation eventually loses all its meaning. They reach a point of emotional maturity where their self-worth is no longer negotiable. They simply outgrow the need for a screen to tell them that they matter. It really comes down to a very practical reality. Human brains have limited cognitive bandwidth. Gifted individuals recognize that focus is an incredibly valuable, finite resource. Every single scroll, every single notification you get, it demands mental energy. And when that energy is wasted on endless shallow feeds, their creativity and their inner peace really suffer. That is exactly why you often see highly intelligent people quietly disappearing from social platforms. They aren't running away, they're just strategically reallocating their energy. What they're actually escaping is a pretty dark psychological trap known as variable reward reinforcement. Social platforms are quite literally designed by behavioral psychologists to act exactly like slot machines. They give you these random bursts of dopamine to manipulate your mind and keep you hooked. Highly cognitive individuals, they become hyper-aware of this manipulation. So deleting the apps isn't just some impulsive act of frustration, it is a highly deliberate deprogramming from digital conditioning. And the reward for that deprogramming is something called the incubation effect. This is a beautiful psychological phenomenon where your absolute best, most profound ideas only surface after you've fully disconnected from constant external stimulation. By practicing digital minimalism, these minds trade the endless consumption of mindless content for deep, meaningful creation. They stop just absorbing the noise of the world and they actually start shaping it. When you make this shift, your entire mindset completely transforms. The typical social media mindset demands visibility, constant consumption, and basically living in noise. But a detached mindset, the one adopted by minds that genuinely crave depth, values privacy and the power of mystery. It prioritizes deep creation and, most importantly, psychological safety. They realize that peace really thrives in privacy, and that leads to a profound emotional intelligence where silence is, honestly, infinitely louder than a story post. So if you're watching this and feeling overwhelmed, here's how you can start reclaiming your own mental space. First, reject the digital conditioning. Just say no to the slot machine. Second, practice psychological detachment. Step away, without any resentment, but with absolute awareness of what you're doing. And finally, shift your energy from constant consumption to deep creation. Remember, reframing this urge to step back isn't a weakness at all. It's actually a highly advanced sign of intellectual and emotional growth. Which leaves us with a final, vital question for you to ponder today. Is your mind craving clarity over chaos? Take a moment right now to reflect on your own cognitive bandwidth. Are you fiercely protecting it, or are you willingly giving it away to the noise? If you want to keep exploring the hidden mechanics of human behavior, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an explainer. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you next time.